All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started first with an opening prayer from our district superintendent.
Welcome to your annual Call Church Conference. Your church is part of the Northern Virginia District of the United Methodist Church, and I'm Sarah Calvert, your district superintendent. When you finish all of your work here, I will be the one who reads your reports. So rest assured, all our methodical Methodism does have a purpose and someone who pays attention to it. I pray that you and your church have the opportunity to celebrate the work that you've done over the past year. I pray for the leaders who've served and the people who've been reached and the generations that will know who God is because of you and your church. I also pray that as you plan for the next year, new leaders, new budgets, new ways of leaning into the resources and the faith that God has given you, that you will see new opportunities for sharing the good news and for letting people know that they too are beloved children of God. I also hope that you look for more collaborations in the new year, new ways of sharing ministry and mission, maybe with nearby Methodist congregations, local nonprofits, and other local churches. May you find unexpected places and spaces in your community that need to hear the good news. I am so proud of the innovative ways in which many of the district churches have connected in the community that surrounds them, walking with those who've been left behind or who haven't yet to find healthy community or needed resources. Please continue to do this work. And if you need help getting started, please contact our district office and we can help you do this kind of shared ministry. This has become an essential part of the mission that we have to make disciples and transform the world. Know that this district and this conference want the best for you and your church. So if I or my team at the Northern Virginia District can help you, we are ready to do so. I pray a blessing on the journey of your church, from the current status that you're in to the future. I pray that God sees and knows the work that you do and that you feel that grace poured upon you. Amen.
All right, good morning, friends. I officially call this meeting to order.
All right, we got two guys up here who just love being in front of everyone, so please bear with us. But, okay, so just to orient you, we got two big things happening. This is all one charge conference, but we have the first part, which is sort of incorporating, actually forming and incorporating and electing officers for the nonprofit that we've just recently formed. So we have to do that part. Then we'll do all the church stuff kind of after that. So it's going to be, if you've been to a charge conference before, it's kind of two different halves. And the first part is really just among the leadership team, but you're all, as part of this nonprofit, you're kind of witnessing that. Second part is kind of congregationally, and there'll be the Q&A and all the normal church reports that you're used to seeing. But that said, if you don't have a hard copy, that's okay. You can go to the website, kingstownecommunion.net/lackingnothing. All the materials are there. There are a limited number of printed copies.
15 copies, but y'all want me to print something that's 50 pages for all of you.
Yeah, it is a lot of...
There's an online version there, and they're also going to tell you why else to pay.
Yeah, so there's lots of stuff, yeah. So handing out the printed copies. So just make sure you're following along there. There's a table of contents, which you can see. We're going to be referring to a lot of the individual reports and things as we go through. There's also, on this link, a live virtual Q&A forum. So as we get to the churchy part, if you have questions about the budget or any of the other reports that are being talked about, that's where you can submit your questions. We'll have someone monitoring that, and then we'll make sure we can answer them before we wrap up today. So keep an eye on that, and be sure to post your questions there, and talk to Michelle or someone on leadership if you can't get that to work, if you're trying to post a question. So again, I talked about the agenda, table of contents. It's all in the packet or on the online packet. So again, as I mentioned, required business reports first, then the state of the church and all the Q&A. So that means this first part, again, I mentioned this, but the board of trustees, the officers that we're electing to the nonprofit, those are who are voting first. And you're sort of, if you're in the congregation, you're just kind of watching that. Then when we get to the church stuff, that's when everybody's voting. And we'll try to kind of reiterate that as we go through the process. Okay, I think that takes care of that. I do have one other, item of business. So because we're forming a business and forming a nonprofit right now before your very eyes, we have to elect some temporary officers. So I hereby nominate Christian Campy as the temporary chairperson for the next 5 minutes, being the trustees chair of Kingstowne Communion's leadership team. And I nominate myself, Brett Salmons, as the temporary secretary of the nonprofit, being the secretary for the leadership team on the church for the next 5 minutes. That being said, I'd like to turn your attention to page 6, corporation waiver of notice. Okay, so this is the legal stuff. Because we did not meet ahead of time to, nominate and elect a board of trustees, have a separate meeting prior to this. This waiver of notice is noting you that we, the undersigned, being all the trustees of Kingstowne Community United Methodist Church Incorporated, a corporation incorporated under Title 57 of the Virginia Code, do hereby waive of notice of the time, place, and purpose of the first meeting of the board of trustees of said corporation. We designate today, the first day of October 2023, as the time and Hayfield Secondary School, 7630 Telegraph Road, Alexandria, Virginia 22315, as the place of said meeting, the purpose thereof being to elect officers, complete the organization of said corporation, and to transact such other business as may be necessary or advisable. And all of the leadership team has signed this ahead of time. So we've got that out of the way. I'll turn it over to our chairperson here for the corporation report.
As the temporary chairperson, I now bring before the initial directors of the corporation and board of trustees the election of officers to hold office until December 31st of this year, or until their respective successors are elected and qualified, and call for nominations. As the temporary chairperson of the board of trustees, I nominate and motion that we elect myself as the trustees chair for the church to be the chairperson of the board of trustees of the corporation. Ryan Boma as the lay leader of the church to be the vice chairperson of the board of trustees of the corporation. Reverend Michelle Matthews as the pastor of the church to be the secretary of the board of trustees of the corporation. And Allison Richards as the finance administrator of the church and treasurer of the charge conference to be the treasurer of the board of trustees of the corporation.
Motion is placed. Do we have a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay. And again, I know this is crazy, but it's just the trustees are the only ones voting right now. But if you're in the congregation and you really feel, you can say aye all you want. It'll be great. Okay.
All right. I motion that we adopt this seal. Is it?
It's actually not up there, but
Okay.
I have it right here. So this is our new seal. You'll see it on it. Once we have official, it says our date and our name, and it's all official. So we will make all these documents official in a second with the stamp. But I don't have a picture of it until I do it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I motion that we adopt the seal, be adopted as the corporate seal of the corporation, an impression to be affixed to all official documents of the corporation.
Motion's on the floor. Second? Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
All right. I motion that we adopt the enclosed bylaws, which have been provided by the Legal Services Office of the United Methodist Church and have been reviewed section by section, be adopted as the bylaws of the corporation without amendment until a January 2024 meeting is called to review and amend them if needed.
And I'll just provide a little extra background there. This is basically holding us over until we have at the start of the year, the chance to sort of take stock of what the bylaws are going to be. But this is basically for now through January 2024. That's why there's specific dates in there. So. Motion's on the floor. Second. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
I motion that unless otherwise ordered, announced, or is necessary, all meetings of the Board of Trustees shall be held at the office of the corporation at 5510 Cherokee Avenue, Suite 300, Alexandria, Virginia 22312.
Motion's on the floor. Have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
All right. I motion that the treasurer, Allie Richards, is authorized and directed to alert Atlantic Union Bank of the newly incorporated status of the church and is authorized to pay all fees and expenses incident to and necessary for the organization of the corporation, as well as the secretary, Reverend Michelle Matthews, is authorized and directed to procure the proper corporate books, transfer all property ownership to the corporation, and file within minutes of the meeting the waiver of notice, a copy of the bylaws, and the articles of incorporation.
Motion's on the floor. Do you have a second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
On to trustees report. Anybody else want one of these still? We have extras. If you would like to follow along with one, yeah. You find, if you want, would like to, if you want the question answer, if you want the Q&A on your phone, if you want this in your hands, if you're looking at the online forum. Anybody else want one? We have like 3 extras, so I did bring a good amount.
And at this time, that sort of concludes the business of the, Michelle, we need one back there. Concludes the corporation type business. So now we're going to move on to the churchy type business. I'm going to get off the stage and do my secretary thing over here. So thanks.
I motion that the lead pastor, Reverend Michelle Matthews of this Incorporated United Methodist Church in Fairfax County, Virginia, shall be the person authorized to register all property, order for the appointment or substitution of church trustees, and file proper documentation of elected officers of the corporation with the circuit court. Motion is placed. Yeah, motion is placed. Anybody second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? All against? All right. And then I motion that we adopt the trustees' report as it appears within your packet. Do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? All right.
I guess I'll keep things moving. But next up is finance report. So that'll be Cheryl Williams, our finance chair.
Good morning. I will, okay. All right. Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Stand right there.
Thank you. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, all right. I'll block that. No, it's not so high you can't see me, right? Okay, all right, let's see. As noted here, we have the finance report that's in your packets. What I want to highlight here on the first page is basically, as you can see from the organization, and this year I became the chair of the finance committee, and then Allie Richards is the treasurer and has been since 2021. Next page, please. Or slide, I should say. The other big thing to highlight here on the finance report is that it was, there was a financial review that was conducted by Teresa Phillips, and when she reviewed our 2022 financial statements, she noted that once we put the improvements in place, that she found our report to be acceptable and consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. And in case you're wondering, well, what were the improvements? Basically, we put in place controls that include a multi-factor authorization. Some of you may know that from different things that you have where you have to put it, you can put in your email address, and then it'll say, well, what's your text, and it'll send you something, and it verifies. So that's what the multi-factor, it's more than one way of authenticating that the person who's using something is actually authorized to do that. And then also the recommendation that we have a fillable PDF form for any payment requests that we have, because that would also provide an additional layer of protection. So again, those are the things that I'd like to highlight. And at this point in time, I'd like to motion that we adopt the finance report as it appears in your packet, including the letter of financial review that was written by Terry Phillips. I'd like to put the motion on the floor. Are there any seconds? Okay. Discussion? Those in favor? Those that oppose? Okay. The motion passes. Okay, next slide, please. This chart reflects the total amount that we were behind or ahead for the year at the end of that particular 2-month period. And this should not be foreign, because this chart was also contained here in the handout that we received, less than a month or so ago in the packets, okay? Next slide, please. This slide and the next two, I would characterize as demonstrating Kingstowne loving large. And it reflects, and you'll see this in the next 2 slides as well, the increase when you look from 2023 to 2024 in terms of our service and justice, and then also the increase in the community collaboration and outreach. Again, the loving large, in which Kingstowne will give at least 10% of our operational budget away to the community, okay? Next slide, please. And again, instead of the pie chart, you have this comparison in terms of the change. And when you look at the community collaboration and outreach and the service and justice, that increase there. The next slide will also highlight the increase in the clergy leadership. Okay, thank you. That, as you can see, goes from the 57.5 to 98. I'm looking at that correctly. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. Yes. So at this point, I'm sorry, I'm looking at something, making sure what I'm saying is actually correct. Okay, so at this point in time, I'd like to go ahead and have Richard come up. He will go into greater detail in terms of addressing the increase in the clergy leadership. And after Richard discusses that, I'll come back. Okay.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Wozniak. I am the SPRC chair. If you're not familiar with the Methodist Church, SPRC is a Staff Parish Relations Committee. It's basically the HR sort of function for the church. Also gets into clergy compensation as well, which is why I'm here. If you could hit the next slide, Brett. And I'm going to not stand in front of the slide. All right. So this is the SPRC report. And so I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll have Cheryl come back up. SPRC, because part of this deals with clergy compensation, we're sort of playing tag team. So like I said, I'll talk for a minute. We'll have Cheryl back up to finish the financial stuff. And then we'll have a vote as well. So some big items for SPRC this year, sort of our priorities. First is moving all of our organizational staff from hourly to salaried compensation. That's something that we've talked about for a while. And it's making sure that all of our staff members are paid appropriately, and that, they are, just shifting them all to being the same way that they're all paid across the board. The second, budget for staff-related expenses that staff have paid for off budget. that makes a lot of sense. We actually want to budget for the things that our staff needs to pay for, and so we'll be incorporating that into the budget. Number 3, increasing hourly wages for nursery workers according to need and also minimum wage increases. We've noticed that it is hard to recruit nursery workers, and part of the way to make sure that we actually have people to fulfill that role is to pay them appropriately on Sunday morning. At the same time that is happening, Virginia's minimum wage is also increasing. So we're increasing the salary for the nursery workers to go along with that as well. The fourth piece and sort of the big discussion item for the SPRC is to make whole our pastor's compensation package by increasing her compensation by approximately 18%. And I'll walk through this in a couple of different slides. And then this is where, at the end of this conversation, we will have to vote as a congregation too. Brett, if you could hit the next slide. So over the past couple of years, just as some background, Kingstowne has not adjusted Pastor Michelle's salary since 2019. Part of that was intentional. We had the pandemic. We had some various up and down with our budget, and we were trying to make sure that we could live within the budget that we had. And really, what we also had to do is, the budget. The Methodist Church requires a certain minimum pastor compensation, and Kingstowne has basically kept it at the bare minimum for what we've been required to do. And so our proposal this year is really the first time that we are actually going above that minimum. So this slide on the left-hand side is the Virginia minimum ordained elder compensation. So it breaks it down into salary in red, and then the housing allowance, which is what the clergy member is allowed to use for housing. So that's on the left-hand side. So that's what is the minimum required by the Methodist Church. Second column is where Kingstowne was for the past year, and like I said, has been steady for the past several years. The third column is where we are proposing an adjustment, so to go from $46,300 to $58,000 for the salary, $26,000 to $28,000 for the housing allowance. And then on the right-hand side in the fourth column is the average comparable ordained elder compensation across Northern Virginia. So you'll see that we are moving from significantly below that to still slightly less than the average compensation for Northern Virginia, but definitely trending in the right direction. And so again, the point that we really wanted to make is we have not adjusted Pastor Michelle's salary for the past 4 years. That was necessary, I think, due to the various budget situations that the church was in. But we do feel at this time that we are comfortable enough making a recommendation that we increase our salary. Brett, if you could hit the next slide. To go in a little bit with SPRC, this talks about how clergies are double taxed. They're self-employed for Social Security purposes, but they're also common law employees for income tax and liability. So what this means is we're allowed to set aside a part of her salary as housing allowance, and then she's also allowed to get a housing exclusion. So the housing allowance is paid directly to the pastor because she doesn't have a parsonage. We don't have a house for her, so we give her that. Then the exclusion is basically a tax shelter for housing expenses that deals with this tax situation. If you could hit the next slide. All right, that is not me. That is a big chart that I do not deal with numbers. So like I said, we wanted to talk about salary now. We'll jump back into the budget stuff for the next couple of minutes so that Cheryl can talk about sort of overall budget things. Then I'll jump back up again in a couple of minutes, and we can have some additional conversation about clergy compensation. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, this pie chart here reflects our, if you'll note, the recurring pledged gifts, along with the giving fees paid, along with the non-recurring gifts, and unnamed cash gifts. Those, well, let me back up. Those non-recurring gifts, unnamed cash gifts, and giving fees paid, when added to the recurring pledge gifts, that's how we arrive at the 210.9, okay? And again, this was also contained in what you all previously received. Next slide, please. When we talk about the apportionments, that's basically Kingstowne giving back to the United Methodist Church, which funded us at the very start. And that's what is apportionately asked of us and is ours to give. So right now, you can see, well, it says 20% for 2024, and over time that amount is going to increase. And you may be saying, well, what is it going to in the United Methodist Church? Where's that money going? And as you can see, it's broken down there into those 4 areas on the right. Let's see. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, this was also in the handout that we previously received. I would call this one, I'm going to refer to this one as the living lien, in which Kingstowne will never exceed an annual congregational giving budget of $250,000 unless every dollar above that amount is poured directly into the community. So, and that's reflected if you look at the congregational giving revenue goal. The dark, it's kind of hard to see to differentiate these colors on here, but if you look on the top right, you'll see the congregational revenue goal, and right next to that, you'll see that dot, that line ends there, and that's at the 250,000. Okay, that's what that pertains to. The next thing I'd like to point out is the year-end business reserve. That's right on the right-hand side again, the year-end balance and reserve that you see there. If that's the lighter red line or on the chart at the bottom. Interestingly, note the asterisk there, right after the 28,900. Thank you. My human pointer. Okay, you know how they used to have the little red laser things? But so the significance of that is because, you know, at this point in time, we believe that having reserve or backup, if you will, of 28.9 would be appropriate. However, in the future, there may be decisions that will need to be made to determine if that is enough, or if that amount should increase. And then the same thing for the clergy compensation. Right now, which you can see is at 86,000. At some point in the future, again, another discussion in terms of whether or not and how much and at what rate that would increase. Okay, so that's the reason, in case you're wondering why there are asterisks, that's the reason. Those are like decision points, I'd say. The other that's more of a pinkish color just basically shows where Kingstowne was in terms of the giving revenue or goal percentage increase year over year. And as you can see in the early years, 72%. And then the thought is that over time, that will, obviously it gets lower and lower and lower, okay, as we'll have met our congregational giving goals, and the increase will not be as significant as it was at the very beginning. That's all I have for the finance report. Richard?
All right, so back with me again. So this is the point where we actually do have a congregational vote. Recall I talked a couple minutes ago about sort of how we reached the decision on clergy compensation. We as a leadership team debated over this over a number of weeks. Looking at the chart that I showed you earlier on the difference between where our salary had been set previously for Pastor Michelle to the average we're across Northern Virginia. And we, like I said, we debated quite significantly, recognizing that as a church, we are trying to be lean, but at the same time, also need to make sure that we have appropriate compensation, and that we are not underpaying somebody by the course of $15,000+. So with that, I'll walk you through this slide. So this is actually the clergy compensation report. Again, we have to approve this as a congregation, submit it to the Methodist Church. I'll walk you through just a couple of numbers because some of this is not extraneous, but not super important for our conversation. So in the circled part, you'll see the total compensation package is $86,000. So that includes $58,000 salary and then $28,000 for the housing allowance, like I mentioned. The number underneath that, the $38,000 for the parsonage or housing exclusion that I discussed about earlier. So that is sort of what the clergy compensation looks like. And then I mentioned earlier sort of about all the tax situations dealing with that. Are there any questions about this particular form?
Yeah, so can you clarify on the housing allowance, what taxes does Pastor Michelle, like, does and does not have to pay on that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
No Social Security or Medicare, right?
Can you go back a couple of slides, Brett? Thanks. So for clergy are self-employed for Social Security purposes, but they're common law employees for income tax and liability, so they have to pay federal and state income taxes on that. And so the reason that you do the housing allowance and the housing exclusion is that it helps sort of mitigate the double tax status there.
So does that mean that the housing allowance, Pastor Michelle does have to pay like regular income taxes, but does not have to pay Social Security and Medicare on that portion?
That is a good question. I'm actually,
That's fine.
Allie, go ahead.
I don't want to, not important enough to hold up.
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So I'm not an HR person and I'm not a tax expert, but from what I can tell, Pastor Michelle pays her own income taxes.
Right.
But the housing stuff is excluded from the portion of her salary that she has to pay income taxes on, if that makes sense.
Oh, so there's,
It lowers the amount of
Yeah.
taxes based on.
So the housing stuff's like pre-tax. Like pre-tax sort of, is that correct, Michelle?
okay, sure, I can speak to this. So the last line actually helps that too, the last point up here. It says the housing allowance is not an additional stipend added to the clergy's salary. It is a portion of the salary deemed for tax purposes as a housing allowance, which makes me eligible then to exclude the housing up to whatever I spend as far as it's not just what they pay me. It's not just what you all decide. It's up to whatever I spend on these various categories, like housing, utilities, other things like that.
And thank you, Allie. You'll see on the form that I had up there, it actually does say the amount that is included or that should be included on our W-2 and that sort of thing. So all of that is calculated out there. Yeah, so the W-2 income to be reported is $40,000 because of that housing allowance. Any other questions? Okay. So with that, like I said, this is the point where we do need to vote as a congregation. So I motion that we adopt the enclosed clergy compensation, accountable reimbursement, and housing exclusion forms with all figures listed as the compensation for our pastor beginning January 1, 2024. Second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? All opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, and from that, I think, Brett, could you do the next slide? That is it for me, and so I think over to Michelle.
Me. Hey, y'all. Thank you. Brett made the joke that you have people up here that don't really enjoy talking in front of people leading this thing. But I don't know if you all sense the level of trust. I And so I have one vote. This is the last vote we have to do. We never did this, and I forgot about it. So when we chartered as a church, I forgot that when we became a reconciling congregation of the United Methodist Church, we became a reconciling community within Aldersgate. And that's still our status. So we have to vote to become a church that is reconciling, and so yeah, we never did this when we chartered. So, I apologize for that. In your packet, there is our statement of the statement that we wrote in 2019 is in the packet on page 38, and we want to keep the same statement. We're not changing it in any way. We still love every bit of the team who wrote it. Actually included Alyssa, who was giving you food today. And Christian was on that team. I don't remember who else was on that team. Oh, well, they were on that team. And so we would like to I'd like to make the motion that with the enclosed welcoming reconciling statement that was written in 2019 and was adopted by 98% of our congregation then, that we become a reconciling church now instead of community with the same statement. Do I have a second? Wonderful. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So this is when, all the business is done now. Super excited. Maybe Ryan, you just come up and we can kind of tag team this thing. You want to do this? Okay, sure. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we have time to answer any questions you have. But this is really the time in let's see, where's the second microphone? Oh, it's over here. This is the time where we want to just share with you where the church is going, celebrate some of the really great things that happened this year, and then talk about where the church is going. So I'll do a little bit of the celebrating, and then I think Ryan's going to do some of the telling you where it's going piece, and I might add into that as well. This is Ryan, by the way, our lay leader.
Hi, Ryan. Hello.
Hey, you got bingo? Somebody got bingo. Yeah, what was the word that you got? Celebrate 7. That was it. That's awesome. So this year, if I think back over this year about what were the defining moments, in my mind, some of the defining moments that I wrote in my pastor report was, having Christmas at the barn canceled for 9-degree weather, right? Like that was like a really sad low. But there were some bigger things that happened this year that I think set us on a trajectory of maturity. So, for instance, we began a few new partnerships in the community. And not only did we begin partnerships, those partnerships immediately became like incredible valued partners. I will tell you, I was texting back and forth yesterday with CJ at Chalkboard, getting ready for how we were going to respond for the shutdown. We had already we created an entire plan of how we were going to prepare. We were going to offer free meals on Tuesday nights and how big the chicken was and all of that, and then we had to back up, but we said we're going to hold it, right? So we have a partner that's willing to do that kind of work with us almost like immediately. We got Fiona's back, right? Like that's the kind of thing that's just so huge for what we do here, how we do ministry. Also, someone like Knowles, who we've been partners with forever, our reputation and our rapport with them has led to them asking us to do an event we never would have been asked to do before. And not only that, this year, one of the crazy bright and shiny moments, even though it got canceled for 9-degree weather, it was the first time in 6 years that Knowles decided to co-host that Christmas Eve service with us. That is the slow work of collaboration. It takes 6 years to get somebody who wants you to have Santa on their property, and allows you to use your property for worship, to then say, we want to co-host this with you. We'll put it on our page too. Too bad it got canceled. But still, those are the kind of big things that just it's who we are, it's what we do, And when that hurts, when collaboration isn't at its best, you can feel it through the rest of the church. It's hard to do things. It doesn't feel nearly as impactful. And so the more we can create new relationships with people in the community. And then we also have this wonderful new relationship with Provision Kitchen. I mean, it happens to be that we had a relationship with Alyssa before. She used to work at our church as our children's director, but now she's planting a church. Hey, we were a church that knows what it's like to be planted. We know what that's like, but also they are a church that's not like this. Like, they're not going to ever be funded by congregational revenue. They are a church where the table is out where people live. And so it's a whole new concept, and it also gives us an opportunity, though. The more we partner with people in places like that, the more we don't buy Wegmans trays of sandwiches, but instead pay Provision Kitchen for their food. Every moment that happens, you'll see us doing that. You're going to say, why are we using them so much to cater? Because their food, what we pay them in food, what we pay them for communion bread, what we pay them for coffee on a Sunday morning, goes directly towards creating an opportunity for people to flourish who live in poverty along Route 1. So we want to do that as much as possible, really making a huge effort to do as much good as we possibly can. I will say I'm not a particularly advanced thinking person. Who knows that about me? So I can really get by with a lot by like deciding on a Thursday, the week we need to have food, okay, I'm gonna finally put that order in, where should I get it? You cannot do that and do collaboration well, right? So I'm also learning a lot myself. I have to think way further in advance to do good work with people where the money will go to the right place, right? But we're doing a lot of advanced effort, which proves to you how we got to this fall, where by the beginning of August, we had our entire calendar that never happened. Entire fall calendar from September all the way through the end of December planned out with 5+ partners involved, all committed to days, times. That's advanced planning, it's strategic thinking involved, and we were able to, when you know what you want to do or what you should be doing instead of reacting. We've always been a reactive church, right? That's part of the fun of it, is that we just can do things. I can text CJ and go, hey, can you buy a chicken for this week? But it's also not maturing. It's not a part of that lacking in nothing thing, right? The maturing is thinking in advance so that we can use our money as well as we possibly can. So that's our goal this year. I'm super excited about giving 10% of our budget away. And part of that, as you see, is also what we do with Knowles. And the other thing is if you collaborate with people who then want to do good with you too, then it's like bonus. It's like, we are already hosting this event with Knowles for the good of the community, for neighborliness and welcome and hospitality, and to introduce them to a church that allows them to have doubt and knows that they're loved. And also, we are going to stock the pantry at Rising Hope with them, right? Like, there's a whole, how can we do the most good? We are going to continue to think that way. How can this be not just a trailer treat? How can this be one step beyond that to do the most good? And that's how you get to giving away $25,000, hopefully, this coming year. I'm going to hand it over. Those are all the things I'm excited about. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to show you a little bit of the 3-year plan.
All right, thank you very much. And should we be cutting the cake soon?
Yes.
Okay, that's part of the 2024 plan, is cutting the cake. Again, thank you all for your attention to all of these issues, and thank you to the rest of the leadership team for kind of wading through a summer of big decisions and a lot of good discussion on this. If you haven't really sat down with this infographic, there's a whole lot of information, both about where we are right now and where we're going in that. Just to hit a few highlights, Michelle was just talking about a few things that are all very interconnected. So these discussions about becoming our own 501c3, well, that also is related to stewarding our funds well, making our money go farther. It also allows us to do things like what's going to be coming here in 2024, really investing in, with our time, a more robust online community that's made possible by not having to jump through certain hurdles digitally that our previous financial or lack of incorporation caused us. So some of these administrative elements, why do they matter? They matter because now we can actually have the online community we need in order to kind of live out our conversations, our collaborations, and our creative discussions. I think on the left-hand side there, that 3-year strategic plan, one of the big things that we did when we sat down last summer, or last September actually, to talk through this was we were all actually saying, let's have some modest expectations for 2023. We're going to have this new 3-year plan. We're going to start a little slowly, work on a few fundamental things. We actually knocked out everything that we needed to do in 2023 and actually took on some of the harder challenges that were going to happen this year. So again, that is both through your own efforts and certainly willing things into existence on the part of Pastor Michelle, and becoming our general counsel, paralegal, and an expert in church incorporation, by the way. So coming into 2024, some of the things that we're really going to be focusing on, and there's lots of little things that are going to happen along the way, but one of the big things is to think about how we can give back to the community even more than we have before. So with these the new budget that we all just approved, there's the opportunity to leverage those funds farther back into the community. Actually, attention towards directly growing the body of our church, online and in the pews or in the chairs, is an important part this year. And that's to, again, extend that reach and also to grow and move from this sort of survival mentality that we were all in for a few years there into something more about thriving and moving forward. So actually, attention to growing the church directly. And I think a lot of the events that we typically have in the fall, we're already thinking about how we can turn those into opportunities to actually recruit and evangelize a little bit. And then, the online community, what are some of the things that, what will that look like? There's the church app that was started roughly about 6 months ago, is going to be adapting slightly. There's going to be more information coming out about that, but it's going to become more streamlined now that we don't have the administrative hurdles of not being our own 501c3. What is that going to mean? It's going to mean that our communication, the way that we relate to each other and connect, is actually going to get more streamlined through the app. We won't have to keep track of all kinds of email exchanges, Sign Up Genius, and text threads anymore. We can all have more coordinated communication in that one place. And that's going to make our actual experience and our online experience much more similar to each other. Also the ability to kind of leverage that going forward. And then starting to think more about innovative ways of worship. Other times of day, other times during the week, different types of ways of being out in front of the community is another key focus for us in 2024, to experiment with those new ideas. And I think, this testing thing at the end there, one of the things we started to realize is that there is an awful lot that Pastor Michelle does that keeps us on track that is actually really the church's job to be doing and keeping track of. So there's training wheels on our church right now, and we're going to be trying to take them off gently. And so sometimes that might look like a little bit of respite, or a little 4 to 6 week clergy leave or something like that, in order to allow us to practice running a church without being directly told what to do all the time. So it's exciting stuff. Hope. And then I think, in moving on into the next year, right, 2025, I think really it's leveraging those new tools, that online community, maturing further. That when it talks about that, growing that accountability to the United Methodist Church, that's yes, there will be bigger bills to pay, but that is an investment in the church's reach and in planting new churches like ours elsewhere. All those things that Cheryl pointed to, like when you invest in the UMC, the larger body, those investments do come back to us. But over the next few years, what we're going to be asked to contribute there is going to be growing. And so we'll need to think about that. And just think about how the church's organization needs to change over time to accommodate the growth in membership and in mission. The point in there about pastoral transition, that's one that can definitely seem like a scary, scary thing, but it's also a sign of maturing. We love you, Michelle, but we know that you may be called to other things. There's moments actually, and she's talked about this, how in the health of church plants, you don't want to have the same pastor for past that 10 to 12 year zone. It's one of the signs that the church is about to decline, actually.
That study that I did, I think I shared it last Sunday, that study that I was a part of, said not a single church that had their pastor for longer than 12 years ever successfully transitioned to a second pastor.
They never took the training wheels off. So I think for all the right reasons, we need to practice and plan and grow in order to be able to imagine an evolution beyond Pastor Michelle. Again, definitely a little bit scary and makes all of us a little nervous, but that's partly what going from surviving to thriving is. Part of what maturing is. You're going to be a little nervous at times. So those are some of the main things that we're going to be doing over the next 3 years, using the tools and the hard work of this last year in setting ourselves up. And I think one of the big things about this 501c3 is the ability for us to tap into other sources of funds and grants for portions of our ministry that we've never had access to before. So that's some more fuel for making this all possible.
Our goal is to never have congregational revenue, congregational community exceed 250. We did not say the goal is to not have our budget exceed
Right.
250, right? That we grow in learning how to find the right grants to pay for the right ministry, and we can do the best we can, right?
So a lot in the future in general, more specifics to come. Take a look, keep the infographic close because there's a lot in there to think about. I know that one of the next key things that we want to talk about is just open it up for a broader Q&A. Even if your mouth's full of cake, that's okay.
If you have a child in the nursery, like one of you could go get the child, and then we can still continue the Q&A, and they can be as sweet and as loud as you want them to be, or as they're going to be. But yeah, we do need to go leave the nursery.
Got it. That's definitely important. So I know that Renee is ready to help answer questions too. Oh, there's another mic right there.
Okay, so I'm going to take questions. Is it on?
It might be.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll switch with you. There you go.
Okay, so just as a reminder, if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can go to kingstownleadership.net/lacking-nothing. No?
KingstownCommunion.net.
Sorry, kingstownCommunion.net/lacking-nothing. Okay, good. Oh, it's on the screen again. Great. All right. So that is in my hands. It'll pop up if you ask a question there. As far as people on the floor, I've already got one question.
Yeah, so I'm curious, how long does Misha have left before the 10 to 12 years?
I just started my 9th year. I've been at Kingstowne for 8 years. The church planted 7 years ago because my first year as the pastor here was basically the end of one thing and figuring out how to start the new thing. So I've been here 8 years. I would say you could call it 7 years just for the sake of its effect on the church. I'm not sure you can count the first year.
We've got another question from Phoebe.
Yeah, I have a question about our reconciling statement. So my understanding of the concept of reconciling churches is that because the Methodist Church as a whole says same-sex marriage is not allowed, that one of the goals of becoming a reconciling church was to say that we do support same-sex marriage, even though the Methodist Church does not allow that. I don't see anything in this statement that explicitly says our church supports same-sex marriage. Is that, are we not allowed to say that explicitly? No, I'm just asking, like, in the reconciling statement, I don't see anything that says our church supports same-sex marriage, which I thought was what being a reconciling church was about.
Hold on. There's one statement. There should be something.
I mean, of course, the term sexual orientation appears in there, but I don't just, I just think, like,
Trying to make it more holistic, and I think the thing is, over time, reconciling ministries has become more holistic. But it doesn't specifically say that, no. But there is a line about our community of faith welcomes all people to the table, seek to commit their lives to Christ, grow as disciples, become members, serve as leaders, and answer God's call. So the two
Right.
things that make the United Methodist Church against this statement is not only what they think on same-sex or LGBTQ marriage, but also what they think about ordained clergy.
right.
That clearly
Yeah.
says we believe they can be ordained, right? And then the other, I mean, that was because here's the thing, our congregation has no say over people marrying. Our congregation does have a say. It's the more important one, actually, for a congregation to affirm is not same-sex marriage, but to affirm that we will ordain somebody because we are the ones who have to approve them as a church. We don't approve whether or not people can go out anywhere. We don't approve whether or not people get married, but we do approve them of whether they're going to be a pastor in the church. So
Okay.
that's a more significant part of it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is more explicit in the statement, I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. I got a question online. The first part, how much longer will Pastor Michelle be part of Kingstowne? Will the great UMC ever decide she needs to leave? What would that transition look like?
So I at this point in my, you all have asked, so I will answer honestly. At this point in my ministry, likely every spring, there will likely be somebody who calls me. I'm that far along in ministry now, and there are so many people retiring, and so many larger churches and places that need pastors that are getting close to that 40 age mark. Because I'm 30, not 30. How old am I, Chris? I'm 38. I'll be turning 39. But like that kind of like 39, 40 so this is the time where I'm going to get a lot of calls. It's just going to happen. The real question is though, they don't want to mix anything up. They don't want to make messes out of things that work. They don't want to do that right now, especially because we have not talked about this yet. Not really much. Christian brought it up after annual conference, but this May is general conference that was supposed to happen back in 2020. So the one we've been talking about, the one that was ahead, except everything fell apart between 2020 and 2024. Everything that we thought was going to happen there has totally fallen apart. So there's a general conference coming up. There are lots of disaffiliating churches, and when churches leave, there's also sometimes buildings that are empty, and they're wanting to do new things in buildings. It's a very rocky, weird period. They don't want to be messing up things that work. But if at some point it's discerned that for the betterment of Kingstowne, I could go somewhere else, it's always a possibility. I just have to be honest, every July I'm reappointed here. So that means every spring it's a possibility I could go someplace else. Do I want to go someplace else? No, I don't have any. I love being the pastor here. I also do know that there's only so much time and so few clergy in this age bracket, right? And so many clergy retiring because of disaffiliations and splits in the Methodist Church and all of that. So I know that. Do I think I'm leaving this year? No. So that would be what I don't want to give you all anxiety. I just want to, and I think you probably are sensing it's the first time we've ever put it in writing that it could happen or something. So you're like, is this their way of telling us that this is happening? No, it's the responsible way to talk about it, because most churches that are new church plants, they avoid the conversation, and then you find out in May, and that their pastor is leaving July 1, and it never goes well. So I would rather you all just know it's a possibility, and I would rather my leadership team especially hold the possibility that within their tenure it could happen. So Ryan is brand new as our lay leader for 3 years. Cheryl is brand new as our finance chair for the next 3 years. They both knew when I asked them on, I want you to know the likelihood of within your tenure here it could happen. And I need strong leaders. So that's why we have strong leaders right now. But I'm not saying it is going to happen. So don't hear that. I'm not choosing that. I don't know that it's going to happen. I know nothing. This is not some secret message to you that it's going to happen. Nothing. Just is the smart way to do it, is to let you know ahead of time that it could happen. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions on the floor? Yep.
So
we have to be out by 1. We have plenty of time for the space. But if people have kids, or if you at any point we needed to let the nursery workers go, and if you need to go, do not feel bound to be here. So, yeah, head out. You had a question.
Yeah. So for the 250,000, so if the congregation grows, you're naturally going to exceed that. So it wasn't clear to me whether that 250,000 was tithes, right? Because you would exceed that in tithes if the congregation grows, hopefully, or it was associated with if you had to give outside of the tithes to, let's say, the Hawk Pantry and stuff like that. Well, what is it 250 referring to?
That's a really good question. I don't obviously I don't know exactly, but I would say that this is more industry, kind of the church industry 21st century language around what it means to be a lean church. And the understanding is to have all of the necessary pieces for a church to run and thrive. And those pieces being a place to do it, a full-time clergy person, a person who leads the music, a person who leads the children, a person who handles all the finances and administrative stuff. Those are the key pieces. And then to also be a part of the denomination by being able to pay what you are asked to pay. With all those pieces combined, they say that a church can do all of that and do all the ministry it wants to do on a congregational revenue of about 250,000. That is where it says, at that point, we should not be, at that point there's no big things lacking anymore, right? Now, do we want out of the blue, are we growing as a congregation so large that the pastor can't, first of all, do we have room here to grow? 100%, right? This space, in and of itself, plenty of room to grow right now. Our children's classrooms, every once in a while, are packed. Most Sundays still have a little bit of room to grow. But we do have, we are thinking about what would it look like if there was another classroom that we needed down the road. But it's at a certain point, you have all the right things in the right place, and you don't really have to pay more for more people to show up, right? You don't have to pay as much more for more people. Then, though, when too many more people arrive, then you need an associate pastor to handle the care, or you need that's the decision of the church to decide, okay, maybe we aren't the $250,000 lean church anymore, because that's not a part of the basic package of what it requires to make a church run. When you get into associate pastor world, or when you get into, we're going to hire a part-time, not like a stipended communications director, like what I think Kingstowne will need at some point, but we're going to have somebody that's the chair of the director of discipleship and the director of communication. I mean, things that it's not going to be 250 anymore. But we don't believe that those things are necessary for a church to run in this world now. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any online either. And just to clarify, Pastor Michelle, I'm asking you directly, if we are wanting to give more than what we are able, or if we're able to apply for grants, that is not referring to the 250,000.
No, right. So I'll let you in on something that is a conversation that's going to be happening with the kind of common good team, and it's something that Melissa and I are talking about currently, and But like, there's a huge collaborative effort with Rising Hope that is on the table, that if we could get a $50,000 grant we are applying for, we would buy a shower and laundry truck. So there's this thank you. Other people are looking at me like, I don't really know what you're talking about here. That's the kind of big dreaming that is not what we're like. We can dream big because there are people who want to give $50,000 grants to that stuff, right? There's certain things that they don't want to give grants to. So we do have to have congregational giving for certain things. You're not going to find funding for my salary, for Brett's salary, for the basic staff of the church that way. But there are some, like this coming year, Sam and I think you saw up there that one of the new things is dreaming how to do alternative worship for people for whom the space on Sundays just is never going to work and they're never going to show up here. The two main areas, the two main branches off of that we see the most is people who want to connect to their faith only through serving. And so what could it look like to have a service that is all about service and justice? Rethink worship completely, where it's not music, sermon, scripture, sermon. The scripture is there, but the sermon looks totally different. You know what I mean? Like a service that's all about serving. What would that look like? What would it look like? What Sam and I are talking about, the other category is families, that this just won't ever work into their life. They're not going to make a Sunday morning. It's just hard in so many ways. But what would it look like to do a film, like a movie church once a quarter, where you pack, like we did Barbie, but we pack out a movie theater. There is an entire guided devotion and worship around the theme of this movie and how to connect with God with it, with added later online connection where we keep talking about it in some kind of online small group with parents who then use it with their kids. Those are the kind of things we want to do, and those are the kind of things that there are so many grants for. So there's the grants for like the $50,000 shower truck that are coming from external to church. But inside the church world, there are countless people wanting to give $5,000, $1,000, $2,000 towards new ways of doing ministry that are outside of Sunday morning. What do they not want to give to? Your normal Sunday morning. So if you like Sunday morning, you got to come and still pay for it, and still, you still have to give to the church, because that grants likely aren't going to cover this. Yeah. All right. That's everything for me, unless you all have more questions. Fantastic. All right. Tanya's going to send us out today with a prayer for the church. And so we should definitely send this meeting out, not in a business headspace, but in a prayerful headspace. And so would you pray with her?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Let us pray. Most merciful Father, send your heavenly blessings upon this your church, that all its members may dwell together in unity and love. Keep far from us all self-will and discord. Endue your pastors with righteousness and enable them faithfully to fulfill their ministry, to bring again the outcasts and to seek the lost. And grant to us so to receive their ministrations and to use your means of grace, that in all our words and deeds we may seek your glory in the advancement of your kingdom. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.